I want to move on to our last question. My 5-year-old daughter with SM has become dependent on wearing her mask at school, and I believe this is exacerbating her SM, making it even harder for her to communicate. Now that the pandemic is less of a threat, so I want to gently work on us removing her mask at school, but not quite sure how to best go about this. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so just so you know, there are a percentage of individuals that come to the Smart Center or even come to camp and they won't take their mask off. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's possibly this was just sent in last week. They're
Yeah,
still very dependent on their mask, and it's done
you can
for
kind of
two
hide
reasons.
behind it.
Yeah, they hide behind it. It's more of an avoidance, a subconscious or a conscious avoidance. It's also a protection. And because this child is 5, think about it. 3 years ago, they were 2. So probably from 2 to 3.5, they were wearing masks. And based on
Yeah.
how the family was in terms of interacting with others and even leaving the house, it's possible that they didn't interact with others. And when they did, they had to wear a mask. And sometimes parents are very anxious and they'll be like, put your mask on, put your mask on. Don't talk to that person. Don't go near that person. That's what we were
Mhm.
going through during the pandemic. And some of these kids, very highly sensitive kids, and based on how this was handled within the home and out of the home, they're very dependent on their masks as a way to protect them because they're scared and they're not used to interacting. So what I would say is we need to come up with a place that the places that they don't use that they use their mask, and in this case it sounds like it's primarily school, and to have opportunities before after school that the child begins to lower their mask and be without their mask. And sometimes it's starting in those places. And we've had a lot of successes is helping that child. Now this child's only 5, so it's a younger child, but kind of charting it where they have their mask, they start to move it down, move it down, move it down till eventually it's just on their chin. And that helps them. Also, changing up the mask so they're not dependent on one mask. So that's kind of like new. And then they have the goal and they can even chart. I've been able to move it down below my nose and they get like prizes. And also just talking to this child by saying that we don't need the mask anymore and let's talk about it, and actually being very empathetic, very understanding that they're doing it out of fear and also the routine of it. Many kids that have anxiety in general, changing up their routine can be very anxiety provoking. So they feel safe with a mask, especially if there's concern with germs. I've had families come to the Smart Center where mom, dad, and child walk in even now with a mask. And the parents are like, we're very nervous. We're worried about illnesses. So, what is that child hearing every
Mhm.
day from their parents in terms of fears and worries? Are they nervous and they're often very talking about this? So I'd want the parents to be very like kind of open and think about like how are they presenting this to their child and what is the child hearing in the background? Because if it's all about being nervous and afraid still of COVID still existing and flu, and they're projecting their own fears or worries, that's going to prevent this from moving forward and the child will not take off their mask. But if the parents are open and very, kind of transparent with the child and say that you can see that your classmates are not wearing a mask, it's safe out there. Yes, you can get a cold, but it's because most of this child's life, they don't know any different. This isn't a 12-year-old where prior to 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, sorry, this wasn't an issue. But this child's whole life, 3, 4 years ago, was, cover up your face.
Yeah. I think it's probably an issue a lot of people are dealing with their children who are that age, not even if they don't have SM. I feel like
Right.
wearing a mask growing up a couple those developmental years, everyone wearing a mask, it's definitely a
Yeah.
unique challenge they're gonna have to deal with.
Yeah, and setting up a goal chart or a game chart, and where the child sees, yes, it's right under my nose, and moving it down, checking it off, and
Mhm.
using their feelings 0 to 3 for a 5-year-old when something's really scary, medium scary, little bit, or 0, no scaries. So 3 out
Mhm.
of 3 is super, and using their ability to understand their feelings and starting in a place that's the least kind of anxiety provoking in the school. Maybe it's after school, the parents just walk around. And maybe the
Yeah.
child can take their whole mask off. So that's the last step in the process. Or maybe the child needs to do it right under their nose. There's a lot of ways to help desensitize this child and remove the mask. It's really working with that individual.
So if I'm a teacher and I have a student that's 5, 6, 7 years old who's wearing a mask in school, he's like the only kid, or she's the only kid in the class wearing a mask. What do I bring it up to their parents? Like, how would you approach it from a teacher's perspective?
Yeah, I think that talking to the parents, if you notice the child, I would think the parents would know because the child would probably verbalize that to their parents. So I would think if the school has concerns about it, I mean, to talk to the parents. But I would say that there are kids and families that are very comfortable with masks still. I mean, you walk around in society and you see whole families still wearing masks because COVID still exists, even though it may not be as severe. So there are lots of families that are walking around masks, or maybe they had COVID. And so they're now wearing the mask in those days after COVID. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Or they were exposed to COVID. So it's not like this child is the only person walking around with a mask. So I don't want to like pull the mask as far as, you know, just pulling it. But it sounds like this family, there is no reason for this child to be wearing a mask other than their kind of subconscious or conscious avoidance and protection and fear and anxiety. And so
Mhm.
I think for that particular family, it's working through it and talking with the child in an empathetic, compassionate way and creating a goal chart or a game chart to help the child unlearn it in the ways that I described.